Imagine that everything you've built throughout your life was about to be destroyed. Your house, your city, your friends, all consumed by an unrelenting fire. You receive a warning: run, don't look back. But at the last moment, doubt creeps in. Lot's wife hesitated. For years, we've heard that she simply looked back and was turned into a pillar of salt. But what if it wasn't just that? What if she didn't just look, but tried to go back? The Bible tells us that Lot had sons-in-law in the city. If they were married, that means he had other daughters, besides the ones who fled with him. Could it be that Lot's wife couldn't bear to leave her children behind? Or perhaps her heart was still tied to Sodom? What really happened that morning? Was she turned into a stone monument in an instant? Or was she consumed by the very fire that destroyed the city? The evidence suggests something much deeper than just a simple glance. What does Lot's wife represent? Why did Jesus tell us to remember her? The answer might completely change how you see this story. Get ready. This story will reveal secrets that few know, and maybe you'll discover something about yourself. Lot always lived in Abraham's shadow. Ever since they left Ur of the Chaldeans together, his uncle had been a guide, a reference of faith and wisdom. But time passed, and success came for both of them. The problem is that growth doesn't always bring unity. Abraham and Lot became so wealthy that their herdsmen began to argue over land. What had once been a journey of unity was now becoming a challenge of coexistence. Abraham, with the calm of someone who trusts fully in God, made a surprising proposal. Let there be no quarrel between you and me, or between your herdsmen and mine, for we are relatives. Look at the whole land before you. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left. Genesis 13:8-9. The choice was in Lot's hands, and he didn't take long to decide. His eyes lit up at the sight of the plains of the Jordan, a fertile region full of green pastures, reminiscent of Eden itself. It was the obvious choice for someone seeking prosperity. Without hesitation, Lot moved in that direction, distancing himself from Abraham and drawing closer to the cities in that area, including Sodom and Gomorrah. What Lot didn't consider was the spiritual weight of that decision. The land was prosperous, but the environment was corrupt. Sodom was known for its wickedness and total lack of reverence for God, a place where morality was upside down and sin had become a lifestyle. And even so, Lot chose to settle near it, unaware of how that decision would influence his life and his family. While Abraham was building altars to the Lord, Lot was pitching his tents near a city that symbolized separation from God. It was just an economic decision, he thought. But seemingly harmless decisions can be doorways to great downfalls. Over time, Lot didn't just live near Sodom, he became part of it. In a short time, the man who once observed from a distance was now living inside the city, absorbing its culture, interacting with its people, and even gaining status among them. The man who had followed Abraham by faith was now writing his own story. But at what cost? At first, moving to Sodom seemed like just a matter of convenience. Lot saw no harm in living near the city. After all, it was where the business was booming. There was trade, opportunity, and all the infrastructure he needed to keep growing. But what began as a strategic decision soon became full immersion in that way of life. With time, Lot left his tents behind and began living within the city. He was no longer an outsider, but a respected citizen. He was often seen sitting at the city gate, an apparently insignificant detail, but one with great cultural meaning. In the ancient world, the city gate was where the most important decisions were made. Only leaders, judges, and elders had the right to sit there. This meant Lot didn't just live in Sodom, he was part of its political and social elite. The wealth he had long sought arrived, comfort too. Lot no longer needed to wander from place to place. He was settled, But at the same time, something fundamental was being lost. Unlike Abraham, who built altars for God wherever he went, Lot built his life without solid spiritual foundations. And that choice didn't only affect him, his family was being shaped by this new reality too. Sodom wasn't an ordinary city. Its values were twisted. Sin was institutionalized. The people didn't just commit injustices, they were proud of them. Moral perversions were celebrated, and the idea of a just God seemed too distant to be taken seriously. Lot knew this, but somehow he had learned to live with it. Was he still a man of values? Yes. The hospitality he learned from Abraham remained. His sense of justice still existed, but at the same time, he was compromised. His family no longer held the same culture he once shared with his uncle. His daughters were raised in that environment. His wife had grown accustomed to the city's luxury, and his spiritual identity had weakened. Time passed, and Sodom sank deeper into corruption. There were no more boundaries for perversion. Evil wasn't just practiced, it was celebrated. Sin wasn't seen as shameful, but as a part of daily life. And while the men of Sodom gave themselves over to all kinds of depravity, a cry was rising to heaven. The Bible doesn't reveal exactly who cried out, but God heard. Perhaps it was the oppressed foreigners, or the victims of injustice, or maybe it was the Spirit of God himself who could no longer bear such wickedness. Whatever the case, divine judgment was about to fall on Sodom and Gomorrah. But before acting, God visited Abraham. He does not destroy without first revealing his plans to those who walk with him. The Lord spoke clearly. The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grievous. Genesis 18:20. The city had crossed the limits of divine patience. Abraham interceded. He knew Lot and his family were there. In one of the most striking dialogues in all the Bible, Abraham negotiated with God. What if there are 50 righteous people? 45, 40, 30, 20, 10? And God, in his mercy, answered, "If I find 10 righteous people, I will not destroy the city." Genesis 18:32. But Sodom did not have even 10 righteous people. Evil had taken over everyone. Judgment was inevitable. And while Abraham spoke with God, the angels were already descending to execute the sentence. Night fell upon Sodom. Torches lit up the crowded streets where the inhabitants continued with their corrupt practices. It was in that setting that 2 angels arrived, disguised as ordinary travelers. They didn't draw attention, but their presence would soon provoke a reaction. Lot was sitting at the city gate when he saw them. His instinct for hospitality, a remnant of Abraham's influence, made him rise immediately. He knew how foreigners were treated in that place. It wasn't safe for them to spend the night in the streets. So he insisted that they stay at his house. At first, the angels declined, but faced with Lot's persistence, they accepted. Dinner was already served when a noise interrupted the peace of the house. Heavy footsteps, raised voices. A group of men surrounded the residence. It was not a welcome. They demanded that the visitors be handed over, and their intentions were perverse. The sin of Sodom had reached its peak. Abuse was no longer practiced in secret, but publicly, as if it were a natural right of the city. Lot tried to negotiate. He even went as far as offering his own daughters to protect the guests. It was a desperate gesture, but it also revealed how much his morality had already been corrupted. But the men of Sodom didn't want his daughters. They wanted those visitors, and they were willing to break down the door to get them. Before they could enter, the angels intervened. With a supernatural touch, they struck the attackers with blindness. Chaos took over the street. They stumbled over each other, groping for the entrance. That's when Lot realized that these men were not ordinary travelers. They had come with a mission, and the mission was clear. Sodom was condemned. The angels gave a command. Take your wife and your daughters and get out of here now. There is no more time. God's judgment has fallen on this city. But there was a problem. Lot still had sons-in-law, and convincing his family to leave everything behind wouldn't be easy. Time was running out. The sentence over Sodom had already been declared. The angel spoke with urgency. "Get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city." Genesis 19:15. But incredibly, Lot hesitated. He looked at his house, the life he had built, the possessions he had accumulated over the years. Everything was about to be lost. Lot's wife also felt the weight of that decision. How could she leave it all behind? His daughters were confused, and the sons-in-law laughed at the warning. To them, it was absurd, divine destruction, impossible. For men who had grown up in Sodom, God was too distant a concept to be taken seriously. The day was just beginning to break when the angels took Lot, his wife and his daughters by the hand and led them out of the city. They couldn't wait any longer. They dragged them out, ordering them to run without looking back. There was no time for regret or nostalgia. God's judgment was already underway. As soon as Lot and his family reached a safe place, the sky opened. Sulfur and fire rained down upon Sodom and Gomorrah. What was once a symbol of prosperity turned into a field of ashes. The heat consumed everything: houses, squares, walls, markets. The city was wiped from the face of the earth. It was then that Lot's wife made her fatal mistake. She looked back. Over the centuries, many have imagined that Lot's wife was instantly petrified, transformed as if by magic into a pillar of salt. This is a popular view in literal interpretations of the text. However, a deeper analysis of the Hebrew suggests something more complex. The expression translated as "looked back," Nabat Aharav, Nabat Acharav, can mean more than simply turning the head. In other biblical passages, the same idiomatic construction conveys the idea of looking with intention, of turning emotionally or even physically returning. This leads us to 2 possible interpretations. 1. She hesitated and was consumed by the fire. Taking into account that the angels commanded absolute haste, it's possible that Lot's wife stopped during the escape, paralyzed by horror and nostalgia for what she was leaving behind. That moment of indecision may have been fatal, allowing her to be caught by the wave of heat and sulfur that consumed the city. 2. She tried to return to Sodom. Another hypothesis, supported by some scholars, is that she not only looked back, but began to return. The biblical text says that Lot had sons-in-law, implying he had other married daughters who remained in the city. It's possible that Lot's wife, unable to bear the idea of losing her other children, tried to go back to rescue them. If that happened, she was certainly overtaken by divine judgment. Either way, her transformation into a pillar of salt also raises questions. In Hebrew, this expression may be associated with how her body was preserved or with the rapid deposition of ash and sulfur upon her. Just as in Pompeii, where victims of Mount Vesuvius's eruption were covered by volcanic ash, Lot's wife may have been struck by hot debris, creating a mold of salt and sulfur around her. Lot and his daughter's escape was already desperate, but what came next was an event of catastrophic proportions. As soon as they were at a safe distance, divine judgment manifested with fury. Suddenly, the sky lit up. It wasn't an ordinary sunrise. It was an intense glow, followed by a devastating roar. Flames and sulfur began to fall like a burning rain upon Sodom and Gomorrah. The heat was unbearable. Houses began to burn instantly. The streets turned into fiery traps. The scene was terrifying. Men, women, and children ran aimlessly, trying to escape the imminent destruction. But there was nowhere to flee. The fire surrounded them from all sides. The air, filled with the smell of burning sulfur, made every breath a torment. The ground trembled. The city's walls collapsed. What was once a prosperous and bustling metropolis turned into a field of ashes. The Bible describes the event directly. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities, the entire plain, all those living in the cities, and also the vegetation in the land. Genesis 19:24-25. Centuries later, archaeological evidence would suggest that something extraordinary happened in that region. Discoveries at the site of Tall El Hammam, a place east of the Jordan, indicate that an explosion of extreme heat, similar to that of a nuclear bomb, completely destroyed a Bronze Age city. That day Abraham, watching from afar, saw the smoke rising to the sky like that of a great furnace. God's judgment had been fulfilled. Lot, on the other hand, was still fleeing. The destruction was not just of a city. Lot and his daughters continued their escape, leaving behind not only Sodom, but everything they had once called home. The city where they had lived for years was now nothing but ashes, and Lot's wife had been tragically lost. There was no time to mourn. The only path now was forward. Their initial destination was the city of Zoar, one of the 5 cities of the plain that was not destroyed. But something troubled Lot. He began to feel afraid. Zoar was small, yes, but his heart was filled with distrust. Could God's judgment reach him there as well? Would the people of the city accept a man who came from Sodom? Fear consumed him, and he decided to flee once more. Now Lot and his daughters found themselves in a completely different place, a cave in the mountains. Once an influential man in society, a member of Sodom's elite, he had become a directionless fugitive. What was left of his former life? No wealth, no status, no social position, only 2 daughters and an uncertain future. The young women, for their part, faced a different kind of crisis. For them, all was lost. They had grown up in a city where there was no lack of men, where pleasure and sin were normalized. Now they were isolated. There was no prospect of marriage, of offspring, nor of continuity for the family line. That's when they conceived a distorted plan. Our father is old, and there is no man around here to give us children, as is the custom all over the earth. Let's get our father drunk and sleep with him, so that we can preserve our family line through him. Genesis 19:31-32. In ancient culture, the continuation of the family line was essential. For them, there was no other option. But the idea was absurd. How did they reach that point? The environment in which they were raised shaped their values. In Sodom, morality was relative, and that had left its mark on them. When desperation struck, their minds sought solutions from the model they had known. That night, they got Lot drunk. The elder daughter went into the cave and lay with her own father. The next day, they repeated the act. He was so intoxicated that he didn't even realize what had happened. From that incestuous relationship, 2 peoples were born, the Moabites and the Ammonites, who would later become enemies of Israel. Lot's ruin wasn't instant. It wasn't a single mistake. It was a process of compromises that led him from being a prosperous man to a father who, while drunk, had children with his own daughters. The destruction of Sodom was behind them, but Sodom still lived within them. Lot's story isn't just one of destruction, it's a testimony to the impact of decisions. It all began with what seemed like a harmless choice, choosing a place to live. He looked at the fertile plains of the Jordan and saw an opportunity for growth. The problem is that he chose without considering the spiritual impact of that decision. Lot was a man who walked alongside Abraham, but he did not share the same unshakable faith. His choices were guided by convenience, not by seeking the will of God. He was seduced by comfort, social position, and material security. But in the end, what did he gain? He lost everything. He lost his home, his city, his wife, and even his dignity. What remained was a broken man hidden in a cave, ashamed of a mistake he could never undo. But Lot's tragedy is not only in what he lost, but in what he failed to perceive. The great irony is that God had already prepared a future for him. As Abraham's nephew, he could have been part of the lineage of the promise, but he chose a different path. Looking at this story, we must ask ourselves, how many times do we make decisions based only on what seems good in our own eyes? How often do we sacrifice our principles in exchange for financial security, status, or comfort? Lot's wife teaches us that it's not enough to leave Sodom. We must also remove Sodom from our hearts. Many try to walk with God, but look back with longing at what they left behind. Attachment to the past can prevent us from living God's purpose. Lot's daughters show us that the environment we grow up in shapes us. What we learn, what we see, and who we live with influences our decisions. They were raised in Sodom, and even after the city's destruction, they carried with them the values they had absorbed there. And Lot, he teaches us that success without principles is a trap. He had wealth, power, and influence, but in the end, he was alone, ruined, and humiliated. Lot's story is a warning to all of us. What is worth more, security in the world or trust in God? Jesus warned us, remember Lot's wife, Luke 17:32. That means not only avoiding looking back, but moving forward with a heart fully surrendered to God. May this story lead us to reflect and, above all, to choose better. Until the next video, God bless you.